We are live.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I am Chair Sage Turner, and I'd like to welcome you to the February 8th, 2023 Housing and Community Development Committee meeting. All council members and staff are participating virtually today. For those of you out there with us, welcome. To help our audience follow along, I'll be stating each section of the agenda aloud. We are streaming live on our Virtual Engagement Hub, and that is accessible through the Virtual Engagement Hub link on the front page of the city's website. We also have an option for the public to listen live by phone. For today's meeting, we have the option to also call in and comment live during the meeting. So the number to call in and comment live is, or to just listen, is 855-925-2801. The meeting code is 9791. Your phone will be muted and you will hear the meeting live. At this point, to speak, you'll need to push *3 and that will enter you in the speaker queue. Okay, we're going to go through a little roll call of everyone that's with us today. If you could, just say a quick hello when I call your name. Councilwoman Antoinette Mosley.
Hello.
Councilwoman Shignika Smith.
Hello.
Assistant City Manager Rachel Wood.
Good afternoon.
Community Economic Development Director.
Hello, everyone.
That would see you. Okay. Affordable Housing Officer Sasha Brzezinski.
Good morning. Good afternoon.
Community Development Manager Jonathan Jones.
Good morning.
And Senior Assistant City Attorney Janice Ashley.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Great. All right. Thank you, everybody, for being with us today. We have 5 items on the agenda today and then an additional item at the end for public comment. And I'll announce each item. So we're going to get kicked off with item number 1, which is the approval of the minutes from December 6, 2022. Councilwoman, did you have any questions, changes, or if not, may I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, because we are virtual, we'll do a roll call vote. Councilwoman Mosley?
Aye.
Councilwoman Smith?
Aye.
Myself, Councilwoman Turner? Aye. All right, so item number 1 is wrapped up. The minutes are approved. Moving on to item number 2 is the AHAC annual report, and we have staff Senior Sasha Brzezinski and Chair of the Affordable Housing Committee, Barry Bialik, with us today. This is the action on this will just be to receive a presentation and provide feedback. And go ahead, Sasha or Barry.
Thank you, Councilwoman Turner. I will turn this over to Barry Bialik, who is the chair of AHAC, of our Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. So,
hello, everybody. Thanks for having me, councilors. I'm Barry Bialik. I'm the chair of the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee, and we're here to talk about our annual report, talk about some of the recommendations that floated to the top, and talk about some of the priorities for the year. So, one of the key things that we'll talk about is recommendations that came to the top are updating the 2008 Affordable Housing Plan. As we know, the last time the plan was updated was 2008, so we're kind of operating on policies that have been created since then, but the overall comprehensive plan really could use for an update. So, that's our first priority recommendation, that we're recommending like an update process, and I think that will involve consultants and RFPs, but we definitely want to push that. The other item we'd like to really bring to the top is we as a committee, one of our top accomplishments from the past year and so was advocating for the creation of what is Sasha's position, an affordable housing officer. Having someone for the city that actually has affordable housing in their title is really important, and Sasha's been doing an amazing job, and so proud of what she's done, so proud of y'all for supporting her, so proud of our committee for being such an advocate for this position. So one of the paired conversations I'd like to have about this is years ago there was discussions about an ombudsman or a position in development services that is an affordable housing specialist, whether it's a standalone position or a planner or plan reviewer who specializes and is familiar with affordable housing nuances would be very helpful. there tends to be a little bit of a, disconnect from the, let's say, the brains to the brawn sometimes, that they're, down in development services, they're carrying out the plans that are brought to them, and that they're supposed to be given a priority to affordable housing projects, and that hasn't always happened. So what we really would like to see is some kind of, whether it's a dedicated position or exploring how someone can be designated as an affordable housing specialist. That way they're aware of the special situations that affordable housing projects require. That's definitely something that we think would be really helpful, since they see, development services, they tend to see the small problems that come up in carrying things out, and that we now, it'll help us have a better look at policy overall. Another recommendation that we're asking is we learned, through one of our, we have some task forces within AHAC. One's called the Build, one's called the Connect. Our Build task force, what we've done in some of our meetings is met with different disciplines, met with like planning, sewer, water, all sorts of people. And one of the things that we learned that I think many people did not know is that MSD is not allowed in their charter to proactively extend their own lines. It's not a state law. It's just the way the MSD charter is written. So which means it puts all of the development and extension of all mains onto private developers. And what we're recommending is that we look for how that can change, especially with a growth plan that overlays looking at where our zoning is, where we already have dense zoning that doesn't have sewers to it. How do we get the sewer to it? Because we have a lot of land within the city and within the county too, but plenty of land within the city that is not accessible by sewer mains. And it's just not, for some smaller projects or even larger projects, it's not feasible for a private developer to do that. So we want to see ways that MSD can proactively do that. Right now, they don't. Henderson County, they do. So that it's a different MSD, different sewer district. So they do have the ability to look at this as a very strategic, where they extend their lines based on zoning and growth. And I think that would be very helpful. The other
Barry, I don't want to interrupt you mid-presentation. I just would like to clarify something.
Yes.
Is that okay?
Yes.
So, because these are great. I'll elaborate later, but I thought we had learned that the MST thing was a board issue. So are you saying that now you've learned that it's actually a charter issue that needs legislative action? It's not just the MST board voting on its change?
I'm not. I don't know the details of it. It's not a state thing. It's in the MSD's charter. So the MSD board does have the ability to revise their charter. And I guess the charter, I actually don't know the details. So it could be an MSD board action. It could also be a state legislative action. We need to find that out. Okay, that's what I was wondering. Yeah,
okay.
I think it's a board issue. I don't think it requires the state. But that's my.
That's even simpler. Okay.
Yeah, I think it is
so that we wouldn't need to lobby the NCGA for a charter change.
That could be correct. Yeah.
Okay, just to be clear.
Yeah, the wording may be a little off on that. Yeah, I think it is a board issue. And in that regards, we also have been trying to get there with MSD board seats, or traditionally the two city seats have been held by council members, or I think mayor and council people. And then what's interesting is as people float off council, they remain on the board. So currently on the MSD board, I think Chris Pelly is still on it, who was appointed from city council. And I believe, Gwen Whistler is still on the board. And we've really been lobbying, and one of the applicants for a board seat recently was AHAC member Chris Day, who has, such vast technical knowledge. So we've been trying to, help on that in our own way. But thanks for that clarification. The other item we recommend as a priority is looking at adopting a consistent set of qualifications and scoring criteria for all of the different programs that we have, and that they're grounded, that there's a document or something that we can ground them in. The Connect team from AHAC has been really focusing on the kind of the equity discussion and how they can create something of an equity scorecard for projects. And we think that's a priority, and we would like to see how that can be pursued. So that's what we're asking is, recommendations to y'all. to pursue for 2023, based on how that plan comes, how the 2008 update comes to place, or really creating a new policy. We're definitely will be participating in that discussion. We also want to look at the Luigi policy. That's up for discussion about kind of updating that a little closely, aligning with council goals and community. And then also reviewing kind of the Housing Trust Fund scoring criteria and how that process works for making recommendations to the HCD. Currently, we're an advisory committee on policy, so these applications don't necessarily float through us. We don't vote on them, but these applications that do, when they have been brought to our attention, whether it's Luigi or Housing Trust Fund, we're in the weeds a lot of this. Our members are in the weeds of this so much more, so we do understand some of the nuances that come together. So we'd like to review that criteria, and then be ideally we as a committee would like to be part of looking at those applications, whether not necessarily voting, but maybe we're a line item when the report goes to y'all, a staff report that says this is what AHAC thought of it. Another one of our priorities for 2023 is the missing middle study, which I believe was just the RFP went out, and I believe the decision was made for Opticos, which is phenomenal since they're the ones that designed that diagram that we all use. So I'm excited for that. The other part AHAC is going to be part of is the Luigi policy revision. We had an initial conversation about it. There's a couple of items that floated to the top that maybe we should look at. One of them is micro units and how they should be addressed. I know that's kind of up on your agenda next. There's a question about whether, I guess they fit the definition of a unit, but whether we should look at a different kind of standard for them, whether it's more like a higher percentage of vouchers, or, there was discussion about a scaled, amount, but, I guess in reality, when you think about it, their tax value is less. So the amount is kind of already scaled. So, but I think it's definitely a conversation topic we would like to look at. The other part is understanding the policy in bedroom mixes, because right now it doesn't really have, but that is something that when we have had the opportunity to look at Luigi applications, we've brought to the attention that Luigi applications shouldn't have a single class of unit, and that there's such a need for family units, and how we can encourage a little bit more of a bedroom mix. Councilwoman Mosley, so you've raised a hand.
Yeah, thanks, Barry. I was hoping you could go back for just a second and discuss that scaling thought process.
Sure.
What does that look like? Scaling according to size per unit? Or are you saying, Luigi, if it's for certain types of units, the amount of tax incentive is lessened for, without getting into what?
Yeah.
Now, so for a micro unit, less. Can you just clear that up a little bit?
Sure. I think we had such an initial conversation about it, just knowing we're coming here. So I think we're just looking for some feedback from y'all, what you see as important. We haven't decided anything or had any lengthy discussions. This will be coming up, but one of the, but it's come up, it's come up just in practical use of these applications. So there's different ways it could be. I think, whether it's, I was thinking of, like, originally there was discussion about scaling the amount. But I guess the reality is the amount is naturally scaled because it's based on tax value, and the tax value of a small unit is less than the tax value of a large unit. So essentially the amount is scaled already for these projects because it's a lower tax amount, and Luigi is solely based on future tax amounts. So in some ways it is kind of already scaled. One of the, another method that's brought up is maybe whether to just increase in these projects, increase the percentage of vouchers that would be accepted. That's another way to look at it. So I don't think there hasn't been any lengthy discussion. These are just in a very, very simple agenda item on us. This is the items that floated to the top, and we wanted to get your thoughts if we're on the right track, that if that's what we should focus on in further discussions.
So a larger or greater voucher requirement if it's micro or smaller bedrooms.
That's a possibility. Yes.
or less number of bedrooms. Okay, I see.
Yeah.
And is the reason behind that is we're thinking that we need more multi-bedroom apartments for voucher holders, like families.
Not specifically for the micros. I guess the micros is just there's such a need of one. I mean, there is such a need. There's such a need of unused 1-bedroom vouchers that obviously a micro unit development is not going to help much for a family unit. So where a micro unit can help is is in those abundance of unused single.
I got you.
Yeah. So yeah, it's obviously not going to help the family units, but maybe we can use it to help the unused single vouchers more.
It's curious that in that thought line, I'll add the 3-bedroom thing. We have been for many years saying we're worried about not producing family size units that are affordable. Yep. And if you look at the tier of incentives or tax breaks or how rebates, however you want to say it, for 1-2 bedroom, it doesn't change very much between 2 and 3 bedrooms, but the cost to build those 3rd bedrooms certainly does exist. So I think that's kind of what I've been hearing for several years that may need to be looked at. And I think maybe that's what you were referring to, Anthony.
Yeah. I think that's the second item of our policy revision that we're seeing if we're on the right track with is how we address that bedroom mix, because you're right. Most of these Luigi applications, they're not submitting multiple bedroom units. They're generally submitting studios and 1-bedrooms, and we think that there should be a way to incentivize more of a mix. And
it may be, I see Sasha trying to shake her head. It may be that we're not seeing those applications, but we're hearing it. Like as a councilwoman meeting with people talking about this, I'm hearing it, that they're not submitting 3 bedrooms because the incentive doesn't always line up. It's actually better for them to do 1 and 2 bedrooms. So it may not feel like the public has seen that issue a lot. It just comes up though. Yeah.
And it was, in apartment design, like when developers are developing their apartment mix units, it's 3 bedrooms is one of the least desired in a lot of these apartment complexes. 2 bedrooms are definitely the dominant amount of units that, the dominant percentage of units. There's less 3-bedroom percentage units in these projects. And it might be, maybe it's good to look at some of the ones that have been approved for Luigi and what percentage their mix was, so there's ways to look at it. I think we're just kind of asking for now, if these are priorities you see as well, we want to make sure we're focusing on things that you support. So we're not, spinning our wheels. The other is kind of that voucher set aside, which I kind of tied in a little bit with the micro units, how maybe we can use Luigi to increase the amount of units that are set aside for vouchers. Another item is, currently Luigi Luigi policy is written that it works for as few as 2 units, meaning if you had a duplex, you could get a Luigi if you did 1 unit, or if you had a 4-plex, if you did 1 unit, you can get it. It has not been used for that because the process and the Luigi definitely favors larger development. So we wanted to see if kind of there's interest from y'all for us looking at ways for how smaller developments and to make it easier, maybe more like a fast track Luigi application for smaller projects, for how to encourage landlords who have fewer, smaller projects if it's feasible. One of those, that's always come in. I think, this has come from conversations with developers and with Thrive landlords, is that they're afraid of right now. The only way to get a Luigi is commit to, I think it's 20 or 30 years. And that's, if there was a way that for smaller developments, if the tax rebate, rather than it be based on 20 years, is only based on the years of participation. Since it's an annual rebate, it's something that we can just tie into the time that's being used. I think we might have a better chance of getting more smaller landlords using the Luigi if it didn't have such a commitment. I would say you need to date before you get married. And the other part is looking currently the funding amount it's kind of this weird, it's based all on future value and it's a preset amount and it's not always accurate. And maybe there might be a better way, whether rather than say a Luigi grant for 20 years is X amount, it's more written as a yearly amount based on the property tax amount. So we're not having to overcommit or undercommit based on what property assessments work out, because it's a set amount where that's voted on that could vary. So that's kind of the initial feedback we're asking from you, or like what are the key questions about the policy that you might have going into this revision process, and of the list that I've suggested or of your own, what particular areas of focus should we be focusing on with respect to the Luigi policy?
Thank you, Barry, and thanks to everyone on AHAC that has been working on this. I know some robust conversations have been had. I'll tie a thought to one of your recent comments. So I've wondered that if the Luigi could be used for the duplex or better used, more accessible, that if it might not help convert a potential STR back to a long-term rental. We're seeing so many short-term rentals, and the question and debate about whether or not it's impacting housing inventory and affordability has arguments on both sides. But at the landlord level, it's the income coming in, and if you could save some on the property tax, it may be enough to shift. So I'm for one interested in studying anything that can help move affordability forward. I know some of these ideas are not new, and we've been saying for years, and I think that's somewhat holding us back. Like the ombudsman idea came when we had Jeff Stottinger. I think that's like 4 directors ago, and he was a state awarded specialist in housing and affordability, and he interviewed, I think, 50 people in the community that were stakeholders or in this industry. I remember because I was one of them, and he asked, what would really help you be able to do this better, faster, with more affordability. And ombudsman came up every time, and it overlaps with some of the stuff we used to do in AHAC, where we'd have the DSD department. Back when Ben was the department chair, he would come to us and we would talk about our codes that we're writing and policies we're writing actually implementing the way we think they are. And the answer wasn't always clear. So that overlap there makes sense to me. I still think that's a great recommendation. So yeah, I appreciate all of these items. I think, of course, there's always the staff capacity and what can we do in a year's time. And when I see opening up like Luigi policy, I say look at everything while you're there. Like look at all those in one big session of stakeholders, not doing one in January and one in September, just talk about them all. And I mean, that's what I would encourage us to do. Councilwoman, other comments and thoughts?
I don't know if this very specific to Luigi, but I remember a comment that was made in the last AHEC meeting, something along the lines of, there are times when the value of a voucher could be more than, Sasha, I see you shaking your head. You know where I'm going with this. It's something like, in some instances, it's more fiscally advantageous to take a voucher than not. Can you elaborate on what one of those circumstances looks like or is? Do you remember that discussion?
Well, I think, if you have an affordable apartment and we say in your agreement, and Janice can help back me up on this, but if we say, your apartments, your affordable rents need to be at 80% as the HUD standards, that's your standard. So somebody may come with a voucher, and right now the voucher rents, the payment standard is higher. I mean, it's because our rents are so high, our housing authority has successfully argued for higher voucher payment standards, which is great, because really, ideally, somebody with a voucher could go out to the regular market and find a unit, right? So our affordable units are really for voucher holders and non-voucher holders. So if I had a voucher and I went to a developer who had one of these units, they don't get to go over 80% AMI rent, if that makes sense, because that's our agreement. Janice, or go ahead, Barry.
Yeah, I would say I agree with that. That about like at a 60% or 80%, what the maximum rent is by HUD, that's a lower amount than what a voucher is. So there's a financial incentive to the landlord to take vouchers because it does pay more. The voucher payment, I don't know the chart off the top of my head, but there is the charts on our website, and that is the voucher payment rent for units is higher than what the AMI standard is.
And there have been times when vouchers, but I think, we have 60%, 80%, and then there's what's market reality, right? So I think right now voucher rents are higher than 80%, but they're not necessarily at that market reality for some places, right? So you might have a voucher and it's not enough to get you into just a standard market unit, but it might be higher than 80%. And those payment standards change over time. So there have been times maybe in the past where they're not enough. I would think they would be enough for 80%, but I don't know those numbers offhand.
Okay.
Looking back at a little list of items. So I guess if we just bring Luigi and open it back up, we'll be able to draw through all of the items. It might be more than what's been mentioned today. But that's great, AHAC and Barry. We appreciate you doing your annual report timely, but also bringing it to us in this way. I don't think we've done that before.
Yep.
Rachel?
Yeah, I just wanted to also thank AHAC, thank Barry, Sasha, Nikki, as well as Councilmember Mosley as the liaison. If you all recall, AHAC is piloting with HCD on this work plan process and us having more intentional, what I'll call connective tissue between the policy review work that the advisory board is providing to the council committee. So it's been really helpful for staff as we're informing the work that we're doing, using the expertise of AHAC to inform that work. And ultimately, we've had some great results already with the Housing Trust Fund policy revisions, for example. So just wanted to say thank you really quickly, because while there's definitely some processes that we can still continue to improve on, it seems like things are starting to go really well with this pilot.
Agree. And thank you for bringing that up and reminding us that this is an example of the pilot. Okay. If there are any any other questions or comments? Shanika, did you have something? Okay. Okay, I think then we can come to a close on item 1. Everyone good? Okay. Those of you listening at home, we're moving on to item number 3. We just finished item number 2. So item number 3 is a Luigi request, 46 Aston, which is micro units, and the action will be a vote on whether or not to move this forward to council. So we have Sasha, I believe, presenting today.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so this is 46 Aston Street. This is a project in our downtown area. Next, Katie. So this project is it's a large development. It was a level 2, or it is a level 2 project, meaning it does not come through council. So it's a by right development in our central business district, which has a little bit different thresholds for council review, and those thresholds are 100,000 square feet for this kind of development. So it's not a unit count development. So the total project is 231 units. So they are committing 20% or 47 units to be affordable for 20 years at 80% or below. They also have indicated willingness to provide, rental assistance or units for rental assistance, energy efficiency, green building certification, and universal design. And through our point structure, they qualified for 21 years. Next. So just really quickly, housing represents all of the rentable square footage, which is one of our eligibility requirements. You have to be at least 70%. And it's 0.47 is about a half acre on Aston Street. They are estimating their taxable value after construction at $24 million. And all units, there's 2 buildings, and they will be on 2 separate parcels, and they are micro units. Next. So this is the location. You'll see that white roof is an existing building that will remain. So that will be parceled off from the rest of the development. Next. Here's a rendering of Aston Street coming from Buncombe Street. So it's kind of in the back streets of our downtown. So just to the east of Cox Avenue. Next. So this is the summary of the points that they have indicated. And, in my vetting of applications, I go through and make sure that they can actually reach all of these. 20% of the units affordable, 10% of total units accept rental assistance. By being in the central business district, you qualify for 30 points. So that's partly why it's such a high scoring application. They're less than a quarter mile from a half-hour transit stop. They're in the CBD, which is a job center, and they're less than a half mile from the transit center. They are also indicating they will do energy efficiency as a part of the building, green building certification, and universal design for 20% of the units. So that gets us to 105 points, which equals 21 years. So it's 5 points equals 1 year of taxes granted to the owner. Next. So here's the kind of the nitty gritty of the numbers. Currently, this land is valued around $921,000 and pays annual taxes of $3,100 a year. Under the estimated tax value of $24 million, the annual city property tax would be $96,720. We subtract out what they're already paying today, and they continue to pay that, and the difference is $93,007 for 21 years. Next. And when you multiply that out, you get approximately 1.953 million over 21 years. So when we divide that by the units, it's a $41,566 unit per unit subsidy, which is, right kind of in the middle of our, 0 to 80,000 is our max. And then after year 21, we would receive the full taxes on the property. Because, our affordability is standard is 20 years. Janice and I have been talking, and we'll need to add this to the policy, but we can basically say we can't have an affordability period that's longer than the amount of money or term of payments, if that makes sense. So the developer has elected and has agreed to match a 21-year affordability period to match the 21-year payment period. He could have also indicated a 20-year affordability period and 20 years of payments. So next. So we're recommending a couple things. So, housing, there is a need for family units for 3 bedrooms. But we also know that 1 bedrooms are very hard to find. And that's the number, when I've talked to housing authority staff, when vouchers are returned, the highest percentage of returned vouchers are 1 bedrooms. So it's still a very high need in our community. So we are supporting this application. Similar to the previous discussion, we just don't have guidelines that adequately address this type of project. It may be, over time we'll see that it perfectly addresses it and it's fine the way it is. But I think because this project is so different than our standard development, it has created some concern in the community. And so when we do these revisions, we want to address that issue. So we are recommending a couple things. We're recommending that the affordable units have a lease period of 1 year, which is also a requirement of vouchers. So if a voucher holder came to, they have to at least have a 1-year lease to make it work. And the developers agreed to that. We also have requested, and I'm not sure that David Moritz is here today. I'm not sure they're on board with this yet, but accepting vouchers as payment for the affordable units, which is not it's not the same as a set aside, but it's just saying we will accept vouchers for those units.
We do have a developer with us here, and yes. Councilwoman Mosley, go ahead.
Does that 1-year lease term requirement forbid subletting during that year? Here's where I'm going with that. Here's the question.
Yeah.
You have years, and actually I know there's some folks who do this. It's like you'll lease, but it'll be to 3 different people who come through or traveling nurses. So one entity gets the thing for a period of time for what ends up being successive folks over the term of the lease. You see where I'm going with this? So is there anything that would prevent that from happening in units of this type? Do we do that? Have we ever?
It's an interesting.
You know what I mean?
I understand.
Yeah.
Janice, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. That issue hasn't come up yet, to my knowledge.
Yeah, I
It's
don't
been
think
raised
it's come up, but it's a good point. I know we've never, we usually defer to their leasing policy, and I'd say most apartment leases probably prohibit subleasing without the landlord's permission. In this case, I think you might be saying, Councilwoman Mosley, that these type of smaller units might lend themselves to these kind of little leasing out over time, and you don't want that to allow. So I think we could say no annual lease and no subleases.
Because what I'm thinking of is executive entities, like some corporations will have an executive leasing component, right? So then if you lease to the business or however long, anyone affiliated with that business could just come in. You see what I'm saying? Whether that person is using it for 30 days, but then, so it's like an Airbnb, but not, essentially is where I'm going.
Well, what we'd be concerned with is the leaseholders have to be the ones that meet those affordability requirements. I don't think a corporation could be the leaseholder in one of our affordable units, but we could add language about that leaseholder can't sublease.
And, and I wasn't speaking of necessarily just the affordable units. I'm thinking about the rest of the units. And if that type of leasing is available, is the tax incentive needed as much? But okay.
It's
That's
a real
more of a
great
Sasha
conversation.
question. That's more, when you say these are different types of units, I don't know if you have more information or if the developer's here to kind of explain, like they did at planning and zoning, what are these size units? What is their lease up plan? Who do they anticipate will be the main users of this?
But because the thing that really struck me, and I don't know where I'm going just yet, but under the cons, it says the Luigi policy was not developed with this type of development in mind and does not address some of the issues it brings up, like smaller units and limited kitchens. So is this ask specifically outside of policy?
No.
Not
It's
yet.
not outside of policy. The policy just doesn't address it. And, we spent internal, and Janice was also a part of this, we spent some time really kind of digging down into all the different codes and all the things and understanding the kitchen policy and all of those things, and determined, yes, they do qualify as residential units. It is so we're on solid ground there. So it's not really outside of policy. It's just not addressed.
So essentially, yeah, so the policy is silent on the kitchen.
Or a minimum size of unit. Yes, right.
And we've
Part of
decided
why
it is
AHAC wants to
what
bring
she's-
it up.
Okay.
And I will say, just for those listening at home, in case that got a little confusing there, when we have a unit that must be rented affordably, the person renting it must qualify. It's not just like we say we're renting it for, the developer's going to rent it for $800 and anyone can rent it at $800. You actually have to qualify for that need, just to be clear for those of you listening at home that might have gotten lost in that. I think it's a great conversation and it's a great point. I know inherently, we got asked a lot early on whether or not these micro units could be inherently hotels. So I'll clarify a couple things we went over in design review, which was they are not approved at a zoning that allows that. So for something like this to somehow convert to a hotel, it would trigger all of those hotel requirements like parking and things that physically can't happen on this site. So it would be a whole new review. So that it doesn't default into that by its own nature. And it also, one of the legal things we do allow is the homestay, but the resident has to be on site. So we're talking about a unit that wouldn't allow for that anyway. So that negates that, just for clarity. Other questions? I know we spoke to the developer being here. If there was something specific we wanted to ask of them. Go ahead, David.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much for allowing me to speak. So I wanted to first talk about the project in general and then address the Luigi specifically. First of all, what excites me about this project is I believe it meets many of the city's goals, affordability goals, sustainability goals, and equity goals. I think that's the most important thing about the development. This is going to be the most affordable choice for someone who wants to live downtown. These are studio suites. They have kitchen, they have their own bathroom. And in addition, as an additional amenity, each floor has shared living space and shared kitchen. It's going to be a nice place to live. My business partner built 2 of them recently in Asheville, and they're full, and people enjoy living there. But one of the main draws is it's going to be the most affordable housing choice for people who want to live downtown. Secondly, it's incredibly sustainable form of development. To compare this, for example, to a project that was just approved by the county just approved a project of 500 units on 100 acres of land on Charlotte Highway. That's going to require grading a whole side of a mountain, the removal of thousands of trees, and every single person that lives in that apartment is going to have to get in their car for every trip that they make to work, to get groceries, and so forth. This project is the equivalent of 500 units on 1 acre. That means it's 100 times more dense than the project that was just approved in the county. No grading is going to need to occur on land. It's just a parking lot. So there's no additional impervious surface at all. And in terms of, for example, water, which is a recent issue, the project in the county is going to require landscaping and a lot of water for the landscaping. This project is downtown. The only water that's going to be used is for the residents. And finally, most importantly, is this project is walkable. It's near the transit line. In fact, it's directly across the street from the bus terminal. Every activity that a resident wants to do that lives here can be done on foot. It doesn't mean they will, but they can walk to work. They can walk to the grocery store. They can walk to have a coffee shop. Everything can be done walkable. When we do these projects out in the county, it creates congestion. This project, to me, is the most sustainable way of development moving forward to do downtown projects. And then in terms of the equity, we are speaking to you here today to have an affordability component locked into the 80% AMI that will accept vouchers. And as Sasha did in her presentation, currently there are 100 vouchers that are unused. This project, that Sasha is requesting that we accept 100% vouchers on 27, would accept 47 vouchers. That's half of the vouchers that are currently unused, just in our project. So I just think, to me, this is the best project I can think of to meet city goals that have been announced by the city. Now, obviously it's a new product, but given the growth rate in the city and the amount of people we need to house, to me, it's the best type of project. Now, I'd like to talk about the Luigi numbers in particular. As Sasha has in her presentation, based on our estimate of cost, each unit will, over the 21-year period, have the grant of about $41,000 in tax abatement. That translates to about $165 a month in rent per unit that the city would be subsidizing. That is probably the lowest amount of subsidy that the city has ever given on a project. And the reason being is the fact that we're keeping the unit small and the cost low translates to the fact that the grant is also low. For example, there was a question there about the size of the units. If we made the units double the size, it would double the cost of the unit and thus double the size of the grant by the city. So it's completely scaled already. In fact, our grant is the most efficient for the city because all of our units are 1 bedroom, and you're providing a tax abatement on the entire property for us granting 20%. If you take a traditional apartment project that has 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms, the tax abatement that you're giving is based on 1, 2, and 3 bedroom costs. So you're actually giving a tax abatement on a 3 bedroom, but you're only getting the 1 bedroom for the affordability. And that's why most projects, if they're too expensive, are not going to ask for a Luigi grant. Or if they're marginal, they're going to come and they're going to get the maximum amount, which is $80,000 per unit. So actually, I think in reverse of what some of the comments were, our project is the most efficient use of grant money by the city. It only costs the city $165 per month per unit. And so if you add that up over 21 years, as Sasha said, it's $41,000 for 21 years. Currently, I think on the homelessness project, it costs the city over that per year for having someone in a shelter or in the homeless system. That means having people in our apartments using a voucher is 20 times more cost effective to the city than having those people in the shelter. So I just wanted to address that one comment that was made before about the cost, because I think it's really important to understand, and it's something I've just been thinking about, is that the amount of the grant that the city gives is proportionate to the cost of the unit. So because the units are smaller, the grant is smaller. And I think there's a huge need for these 1 bedroom apartments. And then from an equity standpoint, all the utilities are included. So it's very hassle-free living. All the furniture is included. So it's meant for everyone. Because it's walkable, people who don't have a car, this will work for them. In fact, I have a friend who works at the VA, and he has a need for voucher units as well. And he was asking me about our ability to accept vouchers. And he said for veterans in particular, many of whom need housing, many of them don't have cars. So it's almost impossible for them to live in a unit not accessible to public transportation. And he was very excited about being able to use vouchers for veterans here because many of them don't have cars because they're troubled and they have issues from, defending the country. And so I just feel like as a project, I'm very passionate about it because I think it addresses the need for housing. I think it addresses the need for affordable housing. We want to partner with the city to allocate units for 21 years, to have a ceiling on the rent we can charge, and to be able to accept vouchers. And so I hope you will consider it. And I thank you for the time that you've allowed me to speak, and I'm open to answering any questions you have about the project.
Thank you, David. Any specific questions for David and his team?
Hey, David.
Hi.
What would be the effect of not receiving the Luigi? What would you build instead, or would you build?
We will still build this. Yeah, we're committed to it. So the impact on not having the Luigi is that we will just charge market rent on all of the units, whatever that is. And we have not. So this, I was participating in the county's plan. They say there's 90,000 people that are going to move to the county in the next 20 years. We don't currently really have a plan to house those 90,000 people. And so unless we build a lot of housing, rents will continue to go up. So again, the Luigi grant, we want to work with the city because part of the reason why we're building this is we want to provide affordable housing. I'm not building a condo. I'm not building a luxury apartment. I'm building something that I think there's a need for that we're missing in the city. And we want to work with the city because the benefit to us is it lowers our risk because our expenses will go down. But it's also going to probably reduce, the revenue we get from the apartment because the grant from the city is $165 per month per unit. In the scheme of things, it's not a big amount. So chances are the market rent over the next 21 years, unless we make a huge effort in building tons of apartments, which it's going to be difficult because the costs have gone up so much. I mean, our costs for this from when we started a few years ago, the estimates are about double from when we were looking at this 3 years ago. It's astounding how much the cost has gone up. So I think we're going to have trouble building a lot of housing. And so most likely the market rents will be higher than the difference that the city is giving us, but it does give us some benefit, which is lowering our expenses in operating the building. And of course, we want to help the city and accept vouchers for the project. So that's part of it. But yeah, if we don't get the Luigi, we'll still build it.
And actually, I have a question, I guess, for you, Sasha. I should know the answer to this, but offhand, what is the maximum HUD allowable rate from HUD for 80% one bedroom in Asheville? Like 1,000?
Let me go
So-
look real quick.
Well, we have, this is interesting because Nikki and I were just texting about this. The website for the city still has 2022's figures, which show that is $954 if the tenant is paying utilities.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe there are newer figures for 2023 that are not live on our website, unfortunately. So we
That usually releases in April, so there's always a little bit of a lag.
well, we've seen it though, right?
Yeah, I feel like I saw it somewhere. That's why I
We
was
saw
asking, where did I see it and what amount was it? I feel like it was like almost right around 1,000.
A little over 1,000 is what I recall, but I don't want to be wrong. So I'm looking. But to that point, there's a couple things to be said here, because what I inferred from Councilwoman Mosley's great question was, if we don't grant you this Luigi, are you still going to build it? And because this is a new model, which I do think it's great to add more housing models, will that model itself naturally only be worth $1,000 or $1,100 a month, such that Luigi, isn't necessarily necessary? I think that's what I inferred from your question, with the owner or developer here.
Because
Not
what I'm
getting-
thinking of, you take it even further, it's almost, would we rather have the tax dollars so that perhaps we could put more in the housing trust fund? You know what I mean? But that's exactly what I'm thinking. And I haven't decided yet. So that's why I was trying to figure out how much would the natural fair market value allow for versus what you would already get from the voucher anyway. And if you're going to build it anyway,
And what I heard from the developer's response was, and I guess he can correct me if I'm incorrect, that because we're facing such high movership rates, people relocating and not producing as much, and because costs are inflating and land is disappearing, it's all adding up to, we're going to have a bigger crisis if we don't do more now. Like, if we can't build at the rate that sustains the population growth, then rates are going to continue to accelerate because demand will be higher. That's kind of the premise, the theory there. So I inferred that by locking this in, we're certainly going to get the voucher acceptance, and we're certainly going to get the affordable rates. And in 10 years, it might be that the market rate for one of these units is $1,600 or $1,800. We don't really have any way to know. We're experiencing a boom in relocation and a crisis of cost. So it could go that way. And that is interesting. I would assume this is why AHAC wants to discuss it and review this in depth for policy reasons. But here we are with this policy, this application, and what is now our second micro unit development. Yeah.
I think,
We're betting on.
Sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I think the question is a good one about the market rent that we're going to receive relative to what the 80% AMI charges. It's hard for me to say exactly what the rent is going to be. I will say that the less we build, the more rents are going to go up, and we will charge what the market rent is. I will say in Nashville, Tennessee, the project that they started, they were originally charging in the 900s. They're more around 1,200, and they're going to be going to 1,400. But I don't want to comment in terms of what we're going to charge in rent. We're definitely going to be a lot more affordable than any other option. But the studio apartment, I think at the Patton, when you add utilities and everything, is like $1,800. So our unit, I know there was a number quoted where the tenant pays the utilities. Our units include all the utilities, including Wi-Fi. I would say again, the grant that we're getting is $165 based on the current estimate of cost per month per unit. That would mean that if the 80% AMI rent is $1,000, that would mean that at $1,165 a month market rent, it would be pretty much a break-even situation for us. If the market rent is higher than that, then we're actually losing from doing the Luigi. I think what we're doing here is sharing the risk because we don't know what the rent is. My guess, based on the way we're currently building in the city and the fact that that the county estimates 90,000 people coming here, and the way inflation is going, that market rents are going to far surpass the $165 or what. Now, of course, the tax value might increase over time. We're only estimating. But I think it is a good question. I appreciate the question. I think it's a fair question about what the market rent is relative to the 80% AMI. So, yeah, hopefully I answered the question the best I could. Does that make sense?
I worry sometimes we're confusing folks that are listening in. I just want to be clear that folks know when we say that a unit cannot charge more than 80% AMI, that number also fluctuates as HUD issues new tables and AMIs every year. It's not like we're saying it's going to be $800 this year and $800 every year thereafter for 21 years. It's going to be whatever that 80 AMI marker is each year that it comes out. And that's just an important thing I think people need to understand how we're maneuvering this policy.
Also,
there's a lot of back and forth. Go ahead.
I add one more thing. I think that in Sasha's presentation, she recommends that we accept vouchers for all of the affordable units, which would be 47. And it's something that we've discussed internally, and I think that that's something we're willing to do. Because it sounds like, based on the current conversations in the city regarding homelessness and shelters and the need for, and also the recent news of a large developer not accepting vouchers, I want to make it clear that that we will accept the city's recommendation of accepting vouchers on all of the affordable units. So that would be 47 additional units in the city that would accept vouchers. So I think that would be another benefit for the city to doing the Luigi. I understand there's 100 vouchers currently being unused for single occupancy. And so I think these units would work well for that.
Thank you. I appreciate you sharing that update. You know, I'm inclined to support based on what we know today, because, I mean, even with the homelessness study being back in the work session recently, it's just becoming more and more clear that we are experiencing a crisis, and the crisis is diverse. Like, one of the top recommendations from, I think it was Lotzar's study that was done for Buncombe County recently, published maybe last month, was that we don't have enough units. And behind that, we don't have enough diverse types of units. So this is a little unknown territory. I mean, we don't have these micro units in our community. The biggest concerns I heard right away are, is it really a hotel or somehow going to become one? And we've learned that it's not. You know, I think of the location as key, because downtown, I'm also the liaison for Downtown Commission and have been involved with downtown for 10 years. And the key recommendation out of that group has always been that we need more residential downtown to ensure that downtown can remain viable and not just this visiting hub, that it actually needs residents all year round. So I'm also layering in that. And I mean, we don't have a policy that speaks against this or to this, so we're kind of beholden to what we have. And I think it's important that AHAC and HCD and eventually council all really weigh how these micro units may be better implemented with policies that speak directly to their sizes or shared amenities, et cetera. But I think that the additional voucher units and committing to that and the location itself, and we know that the average person in Asheville that commutes spends 25% of their incomes on transportation. That's a publicized figure on the H&T index. And so if you're somewhere you don't have to have a vehicle, you're already inherently you're saving more money. So the location is key here. So I'm inclined to support and move it forward to council, and we'll have, I guess, additional windows to kind of extrapolate, maybe other conditions or what it looks like or what it might play out as.
Paige, I'm inclined to support as
Yep.
well, but one thing that's kind of bothering me right now concerning the policy in general is that we don't have specific guidelines for micro housing. And I don't want to decline this request on today, but I'm wondering if we can take the appropriate time for this to kick back to AHAC and us to kind of have a detailed discussion about the questions that are here and the questions that are there, and then have David come back for a final discussion towards approval.
Supportive of that. I mean, AHAC just spoke literally to this 30 minutes ago. I'd be interested to know their feedback. I don't know. I mean, staff, maybe that's more of a question for you as well. I mean, is that even a reasonable approach? Because it's not like AHAC can just open up the item and close it in a month. Staff has to do research and prepare documents. There has to be documents ahead of meetings and so on. Any thoughts from staff on that? Sasha, you specifically?
So we are little under capacity right now, I'll just say that. And we were this Luigi policy review is going to be stretched out and maybe even combined with our affordable housing plan update, or kind of also getting some policy guidance from an expert. I think we could do it. I just don't know how much staff time there is to do more digging and bring more stuff back, I guess.
Councilwoman Mosley?
And I guess maybe the developer might also have a thought on that. I don't know how that timeline affects him. So sorry.
So I'll go ahead and say for me, because this is one of the few times where I'm like 30 seconds ago, yes, 20 seconds before that, no. This would be one where I would really benefit from the expertise of AHAC. I love the 47 affordable units. I want to be able to vote yes for that. But if you're going to do it anyway, then I would love the tax dollars. So it would be my request, as Councilwoman Smith said, that AHAC take a look at this. I appreciate staff capacity issues, but what I don't want to do is to vote no today. I would love for it to be a level of unanimity when it goes to the full council. That would just be my preference.
Thank you. And as a general reminder, we just agreed to have 2 HCD meetings in March. So it could go to AHAC and come back to.
And also, I will go ahead and say, David, so you don't think, I appreciate the work that you do. I appreciate the fact that, because you're local, right? And you have those sites that are on the South Slope. I just still have questions, and I want to be secure enough in my vote today. And I would appreciate, like I said before, the expertise from AHAC.
Mr. Moritz, do you have a thought on that, on delaying and coming back to us?
I want the city to be completely comfortable and to have the opportunity to discuss it, since it's something new. So this project is going to be our second one. We're going to do the one on Hilliard first, which has full approval. We're still, one thing I do want to mention, because I kind of answered the question yes or no before, is that one of the, we're about a year delay on the one on Hilliard, and that's because the cost to build compared to what we had initially thought is almost double. And we don't, so we had to actually go back to the bank and negotiate a new loan to be able to do it because their initial loan was too small. And thankfully, our bank is supportive of this project, so they've agreed to increase the loan size that will allow us to build it. So we're currently renegotiating with contractors, and hopefully we'll be able to start that in May. So, Ms. Mosley, to answer your question before, our intention is to build it, but there's still a lot that has to happen, and the costs are going to have to make sense. So it is possible that if the costs come back and it's not feasible, then there is a possibility we wouldn't build it. With the Luigi grant itself, it's hard to say today. I mean, my intention is we want to build it, so that's why I say that. But obviously, there's a lot of factors that go into it, including the cost that are going to continue to increase. But in terms of the city becoming comfortable with this type of unit, you know, I think it's great. I'm very excited to build it. If you need more time, it's not going to currently impact our schedule on the Aston Street project itself. And that's because, you know, we're currently on pause on that one in terms, like, to go through full approval with the city and get permits, we need full construction drawings. And that can cost a lot. So we put a pause on that until we have all our approvals, and then we move forward on that. So not to make it too long of a statement, the short answer is yes. You know, I want to work in partnership with the city and make sure that everyone's comfortable. And but I do just I don't want to add any more work to city staff because I know they're doing a lot, and Sasha's been working very hard on this, so I can't speak for city staff themselves.
I appreciate that because it sounds like we're inching towards that. And it does look like we perhaps have the AHAC chair. I didn't know if you wanted to comment on that. And I know as to whether or not they'd even be able to get it on an agenda and review, or maybe one of those subcommittees could. Maybe he's not with us. Oh, he is with us.
Oh, so I have been listening. Sorry, Sage, what did you want to ask me?
Well, we're debating whether or not to send it back to AHAC for y'all's expertise, because we have councilwomen that want to support it but have some lingering questions. And we know that AHAC had just said literally 30 minutes before this that they'd like to review and weigh in on how micro units may relate to Luigi asks. So would AHAC feel that they could, and I can't speak for the whole committee, but do you feel like potentially y'all could have this as an agenda item at your next meeting and kick us back some input?
I think so. Yeah, I think we could, since obviously this means from our first agenda item, we are like, these are the things we're asking for. So if you say yes, this is it, and this is priority because it's there's a need for it right now. Yeah, we can bring that. We can focus on that at our next meeting. I think our meeting was bumped a week from council retreat, but we're lining that up right now. But yeah, I think we can do that, and then we can just focus specifically on that, that Luigi item.
Okay, Nikki or Rachel, any concerns there that you'd like to share, schedule-wise, bigger picture-wise, things we might not see?
I just want to, whatever's decided is perfectly fine. I just want to draw to the committee's attention some of the meatier agenda items that we have coming up. So the March 21st HCD meeting is going to be solely dedicated to the CDBG applicant presentation. So we won't have time for any other action at that meeting. And then March 28th is when you're going to be making your home funding recommendations as well as your CDBG funding recommendations. So likely to be some robust dialogue as part of that. I think Sasha was also planning on providing a housing trust fund application overview at that meeting because she's in the process of vetting those initial housing trust fund applications that have come through. I'd hate to say we need to push this to April because the date is April 18th. So we're talking about 2 months from now if we postpone it 2 months. So I just wanted to give some context to the committee members that we've got a lot of pretty substantive items coming down the pipeline with this committee.
Ms. Moritz, does April scare you? Potentially May at council?
Push for the city council meeting.
Well, come back to HCD in April and then potentially to council in May. Sounded like Aston has you delayed.
That's
okay.
Fine. That's fine with me.
Okay. So it sounds like we have some action there, right? So we're going to delay this one. We're going to send it back to AHAC for their expertise. This is a great use of the pilot. Thank you, AHAC, for being willing to discuss something so quickly. And then it'll come back to us at HCD in April because we have a very packed March, and then potentially move to council in May. All right, we're all on the same page. Thank you, Councilwoman, staff, and developer for partaking in that very long conversation, but we have a plan. All right, and I'm keeping track of the time. It is now 1:10, and we are just moving on to item number 4. We still have another item number 5 after this, and a public comment period. So we are at item number 4, which is another Luigi request for New Leicester Highway. And it looks like, Sasha, you're going to lead through this one again.
Yes, so this request is for 157 New Leicester Highway. And I can, there we go. Okay, thanks, Katie. Next, you can go ahead. So this is a conditional zoning application that is coming to City Council on February 14th. It is committing 29 units, 20% to be affordable for 30 years. 30 years, not 20. So they're extending that commitment an extra 10 years. And they also have other benefits, including rental assistance, housing one person from the homeless by name list, energy efficiency and green building certification and universal design. And it qualifies for 16 years of taxes paid. Next. So the total project, 141 apartments. Their mix is split in half between 1 and 2 bedrooms for affordable units. 100% of all the rentable square footage is housing. And again, 30 years. And this project is on almost 5 acres of land on New Leicester Highway. And they are estimating a taxable value of $26.5 million. Next. So here's the project location. Next. And here are exterior elevations. So I think they've already been through planning and zoning and received approval there and moving forward to you all, as I said, next week. So we're bringing these together. Next. And just quickly, the point summary, the initial 20 points, that baseline 20% of units affordable, which you have to do to get into the program. They are extending the affordability an additional 10 years, which gets them another 10 points. The rental assistance for 5 points. Housing one person on the homeless by name list gets an additional 5 points. They are 1 mile from an urban center. And so that's also on our future land use map. And we have an urban center on Patton Avenue. And a half mile from a transit amenity. They're pretty close to a grocery store, what we'd consider a full service grocery store. They are on a transit line, but it's not a very frequent transit line. So energy efficiency for 5 points, green building certification for another 10 points, and universal design for 20% of the units, which gets them another 10 points. So total 80 points or 16 years of taxes granted back. Next. So currently this land has a value of $316,000 approximately, and they're paying $1,276 in taxes. Under the estimated value of $26.5 million. Post completion, the annual city property tax will be approximately $106,795 a year. So the difference is $105,519 annually, which would be granted for 16 years. Next. So this results in a total grant of $1.688 million, and that equals $58,217 per unit, which is lower than our 80% subsidy cap in the policy. And then after year 16, we would receive the full taxes back. I will say, and I should have probably said this in the last presentation, these are estimates. You know, if the county assessed, and so they're really caps on our agreement. So after the approval at council, Janice and I work together with the developer, and we have a Luigi agreement that is signed, a deed restriction is placed on the property, and those are caps. If the county came and assessed the value at higher than 26.5 and the city taxes were higher, we don't have the ability without council approval to raise that agreement amount. We would have to come back, the developer would, could request to come back to council. If it is less than that amount, then the city still pays our tax amount, so it's less. These are estimates that we're working with. So just, I know you all probably know that, but just want to clarify that for anyone who's listening. Next. So staff is recommending approval of this application. It will be reviewed, and this was also similar in the last application, will be reviewed by the Finance Committee after your review. So we will put off the last one. But this is on the agenda for Finance Committee next week, or Policy, Finance, and Human Resources. It has a new name, I'm sorry. And then it'll be at City Council later that night. So and with the conditional zoning hearing. Next. And I think we're back to, we may not have the key takeaway slide we're supposed to, but that's our recommendation, and that concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions. And Clark Mills with Cohen Esri Development is here, and so is Derek Allen with the project.
Thank you, Sasha. Councilwoman, any questions, thoughts about this particular application? This one's a little more straightforward than what we're used to seeing. So I sense there are fewer questions than concerns. I can appreciate that this is some good infill in that area. That map, I actually looked it up, but it looked like it was adjacent to, gosh, I'm blanking on the name of that apartment complex right now. But an apartment complex that has some large amount of rentals and has been a sustainable, it has some affordable units in it actually. So the location is great. Can you go back a couple slides? There we go. Yeah, we flew through it. I just wanted to look at that again. Okay, so 16 years. Okay, and you know, this would be a great question. Actually, I was going to ask with the last one as well. Janice, this might be for you. So I think that might have been the first time I heard that we can't expect an affordability period longer than the tax rebate agreement period. But that's true. We can't finagle anything that says, you know, we expect affordability for 25 years, but your math only adds up to 16 years of subsidy.
Oh, you could do that, but what we don't want is the reverse. We don't want to make payments for 25 years for like a 20-year affordability. You know, we don't want to be paying while it goes all reverts to market rate. That doesn't.
That makes a lot more sense. Okay, so I just misunderstood. Okay. So we could, in a sense, always expect 20 years, even if their points only add up to 16 in this case.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from other councilwomen for staff or the developer? It appears developer Clark is here. If no one has any questions, feel free to make a motion.
I move to recommend that City Council approve the land use incentive grant application for Cohen Esri Development Group at 157 New Leicester Highway.
Second.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, Clark, you're getting off a little easier than the last guy did.
Yeah, I was kind of nervous going second, but thank y'all. Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, we're going to do a roll call vote because we are virtual. Councilwoman Mosley.
Aye.
Councilwoman Smith.
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner, myself, aye. So this item will move forward to council with our recommendation. Thank you for being here, Clark. Sorry to make you nervous for so long, but we appreciate the time.
This is great.
It's great. All right, we are done with item number 4 and quickly moving on to item number 5, which is CDBG and a helpmate COVID shelter request. And I believe we have our, are we saying soon to depart, Jonathan Jones with us?
Thank you very much. For this afternoon, I wanted to walk through a reallocation option for our CDBG, our CB program in connection with Helpmates Non-Congregate Shelter. So Katie, if you can click to the next slide. As a reminder, the CDBG CV program, that is funding that was allocated back in 2020 under the CARES Act with the explicit purpose of preventing, preparing for, and responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. In November of 2020, council approved the city received a little over $1.5 million in CDBG CV funds, and directed those to programs specifically homelessness prevention, non-congregate emergency shelter, and community coordination activities. So the idea was to help people experiencing homelessness in the community weather the impacts of COVID, and those funds were included as part of the fiscal year 2019-2020 annual action plan. So any decisions that are made regarding these funds will have to go to HUD as an update to that plan. Part of the spending requirements for the CDBG CV funds are that 80% of that money must be used and drawn from the city's treasury account by September 2023. At this time, our account shows we're at about 50% spend down on that. So trying to work on completing the projects that we have and make sure that we've got a plan to spend the remaining amount. Next. So in that same time frame, Helpmate took precautions on the way that their domestic violence emergency shelter was operating, and relocated to a hotel in the area and started operating as a non-congregate shelter, and had originally planned to receive funding approved by FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. And initially, North Carolina Emergency Management was going to be the pass-through for those funds. So Helpmate would get reimbursed from the state, and then the state would pass that reimbursement request on to FEMA. And so that was working fine until about November 2021, when the state emergency management stepped out of that pass-through relationship across the board. And so Helpmate was left to make a direct request to FEMA. But based on the way that the requirements for the FEMA reimbursement were set up, they would have needed to have a direct contract with a unit of local government authorizing them to open and operate a non-congregate shelter to be reimbursed with FEMA funds. So because they were working with the state, that wasn't established back in 2020. And so next we can look at Helpmate reached out to FEMA, asked for that reimbursement, but then reached out to the city to see if there was any way that the city could assist and really retroactively authorize those activities. Looking at the timetable to make that appeal, and also the city's experience with trying to go through the appeal process and satisfy FEMA about the appropriate authorizations, staff we looked at an alternative, and that was the CDBG CV program. Under CDBG CV, the emergency shelter non-congregate model is an eligible public service activity of which there is not a specific cap. And so staff have talked to Helpmate about requesting a reimbursement of $102,000 and change to cover the costs of that non-congregate shelter operation between November 2021 and April of 2022. Next. So the staff's recommendation is that because the city has allocated funds for similar purposes using CDBG CV money to address the unsheltered and people experiencing homelessness, the fact that there is a balance that remains after the work completed at the Red Roof Inn non-congregate shelter and the homelessness coordinator contract that the city had during the pandemic. The staff recommendation would be that the request be fulfilled, and that as really a way to address an unanticipated need in the community. In addition, it would allow us to make progress towards that 80% spend down deadline. So would move the needle a little bit further and get us up to 55% at $840,000 spent to date. Before we move to questions, I did ask April Burgess Johnson, the Executive Director of Helpmate, to join us this morning so that she could share some of the impact of the changes at the shelter and how that project went, as well as answer any questions that the committee might have.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, and thank you for the invitation to be here today. I appreciate the opportunity to speak about what the pandemic was like for domestic violence survivors and how Helpmate tried to be nimble in responding to those conditions. As you all probably know, Helpmate currently operates a 20-bed shelter located within the city limits of Asheville. The way that our shelter is constructed, it is a congregate shelter, meaning that every bedroom has 3 beds in it, and every set of 2 bedrooms shares a bathroom, which means that when the pandemic began, it was very clear that we were going to have to do something differently if we were going to balance the safety needs of survivors who were trying to flee abusive partners with the health and safety needs that our entire community was facing, because it was clear that it was unsafe to put 6 unrelated people sharing 1 bathroom in a small closed environment. And so we took an action that's non-traditional for nonprofits, which is that we tried to be nimble. And early on in the pandemic, in April of 2020, we took the pretty drastic step of closing our emergency shelter, which it's a drastic step because we serve about 225 people from 150 families there every year. We get another 300 requests from folks that we have to shelter outside of our community because we've got limited capacity. That means that the people who are staying in our shelter are at extremely high risk. 92% of the folks who live in our shelter are in the extreme risk category for domestic violence homicide as measured by Johns Hopkins University. And we know that violence has a disproportionate impact on BIPOC folks who live here in Asheville. 41% of Helpmate shelter residents are BIPOC folks. And so there's both a health and safety and an equity aspect to us realizing that we had to act quickly. And so the same day that we closed our congregate shelter, we opened a domestic violence shelter on 1 floor of an open public hotel here in the community. Now, if y'all want to talk about a scary thing to do, that's a scary thing to do. I've done this work for 30 years, and we've never tried to have a secret shelter in a public place like a hotel. But successfully, we were able to navigate the multiple challenges that came along with that. We worked with churches and community members and volunteers to make sure that we had 3 hot meals per day delivered to every single family who was staying in that hotel-based shelter. We worked with the hotel to have access to their security systems so that we could monitor the security of the folks who were living in shelter. And we provided, from the beginning of the pandemic till now, we've provided 313 adults and 215 children with more than 10,000 safe nights of shelter. And those were nights when kids didn't have to worry about blue lights shining through their bedroom window in the middle of the night as the police were showing up because of violence that impacted one of their parents. It was a place where we had, we did all the things that the city did when you all opened a non-congregate shelter. And we layered on top of that trauma-based services. So we had trauma-based counseling, we had ongoing case management, we had a 24-hour multiple staff presence in this hotel to make sure that the environment was not just safe, but was also conducive to healing. This experience also really informed our plans to enlarge our domestic violence shelter, which we've known for years needed to happen. But it really informed our design into one that is pandemic responsive, where we basically will have 1, 2, and 3 bedroom small efficiency suites that folks will be able to stay in, which means that, and let's all like throw salt over our shoulder and cross our fingers that this never happens. But if we ever have another public health crisis like this, we'll be set up in a way to manage it without having to worry about the additional layer of safety risks that we had to worry about during this time period. So as Mr. Jones said earlier, we did work with local government officials to the extent that we could and we needed to during this. We were referred on by city staff to that North Carolina emergency management process, wherein they sought FEMA reimbursement on our behalf. That all ran smoothly. We followed all of their guidelines. When that program ended is when we were informed that we needed, because we got a denial when we billed US FEMA, that we needed this agreement with the city. And that's when I reached out to city staff and what brought us here today. During the time period that was denied by FEMA, right? It wasn't the full scope of the pandemic. It was November 10th of 21 to April 30th of 22. During that time period, 66 adults and 44 children were sheltered in this hotel-based shelter. And so it is just only the direct lodging and security expenses that we incurred during that time that we billed to FEMA. And that's the exact same request that we're making of you all today. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you for your consideration.
I'm really confused about why the North Carolina Emergency Management pulled out as the pass-through for FEMA, because it seems like at the very height of pandemic-related reimbursement request. So was it that their program year was over, or did some type of emergency occur? I'm not getting that. I'm a little confused.
Thank you, Ms. Vice Mayor. And we had the same layer of confusion. They stopped administering the program statewide. So it wasn't Helpmate specific or even Asheville specific. They discontinued that pass-through service that they offered. And possibly Jonathan has more information about why that happened, but they didn't tell us why they stopped. We just found out when a billing was rejected, and they called us and said, oh, actually, you need to bill US FEMA for this. We're not doing that anymore. That's how we found out that we needed to file the application with US FEMA, which we did within a week.
And then they give any guidelines, because those requests can be very strenuous. Did they give you any guidelines on how to make a successful request from FEMA, given that they pulled out?
I'm so grateful for that acknowledgement. This was a beast. This was something that our nonprofit had never encountered before. And we were definitely in over their heads, over our heads. And no, they didn't provide any written guidance. They did provide us with a contact phone number for a person named Shonda Corbett, who's a kind human, and talked us through some of the pieces and put us in connection with folks who had answers to questions that she didn't. But I still don't know the why of the change.
Interesting.
I will
Go
say
ahead.
I'm not aware of exactly the reason that North Carolina Emergency Management shifted their role in the process. I do know that it was something that happened. We had received notice that there was going to be a change as the city was wrapping up its FEMA reimbursement process, because some of the same shelter costs at the Red Roof Inn shelter were also billed to FEMA, and some of those were handled through that pass-through. So I would say yes, the FEMA process is also a very different one than probably the city or any of our community partners are familiar with, and can be quite arduous.
And tell me why we couldn't make that request on Helpmate's behalf, like act as the legal authority.
So first, because the city went through a similar process when shifting operations from the Harrah's Center to Red Roof Inn and navigating when that authorization happened and how that was documented. So it's not the first time this issue has come up, and knowing that it's not as clear as being able to use an immediate resource that we can approve that would directly affect our COVID response using CDBG CV. So the approach here was to look at an element and a funding source that the city has direct management of versus continuing to pursue a FEMA reimbursement that could be delayed or further denied, and doing so on a rather narrow appeal window. So FEMA would have required that HelpMate have that appeal submitted within 60 days of the rejection, meaning that the city would have had to have gone through our authorization of that in that 60-day time frame, which is really fast for the city to go through and do. So this seemed to be the most expedient and direct approach.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
It's not also something that we typically get to say about the CDBG program.
True. I appreciate all the information and staff work on this. I wasn't aware this had happened at to HelpMate, so it's both upsetting at that state level, but also hopeful that we can help them and also move towards our better allocation spending rate. Any other questions or comments before we just move this to a vote? Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to recommend the city reallocate $102,557 to available community development block grant COVID funds to reimburse HelpMate for prior non-congregate emergency shelter operations as an amendment to the FY 19-20 annual action plan, and authorize the city manager to sign all necessary documents to this effect.
May I make a friendly amendment? The dollar amount is actually $102,557.10.
Okay.
No need to amend, just correct the number, right? Yeah. Okay, great. So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. Any other discussion before we go to a roll call vote? Okay. All right. Roll call vote. Councilwoman Mosley?
Aye.
Councilwoman Smith?
Aye.
Myself, Councilwoman Turner? Aye. All right. Thank you, April, for being here today and sharing more about what HelpMate experienced in the pandemic. And I'm glad that we can come through like this for you.
Thank you, Councilwomen. I appreciate you each very much. Thank you also to Jonathan.
Thank you. And I do believe we have public comment, one more item. So for those of you listening at home, we're on to item number 6, which is public comment. Do we have anyone on the line wishing to make a comment?
No, we do not.
All right. Thank you, Katie. And I know that before we adjourn, Nikki wanted to take a moment and say a couple things. So go ahead, Nikki.
Thank you. And I know Jonathan went off screen, but I'm sure he's still listening in his office. But we did wanted to take a moment to share our appreciation for Jonathan's work here at the City of Asheville. He's been a longtime city employee in the Community Development Division and took the helm of the Community Development Division as its manager at a time when we really needed him. Jonathan came to me and said, I know that we need some leadership in this role and I want to step in as interim. We were fortunate that he accepted the permanent position and really has led that team. You all have been the beneficiaries of seeing some of his work in action. From things like improving our CDBG and home process, having the Stevens Lee Community Center see much needed improvements that are happening as a result of some CDBG investments that he really helped shape and help deliver on. And then also just leading the team, some behind the scenes work that he's done to really engage his team, train his staff. So I'll have to say, I personally have been going through the many stages of grief. I thought I had hit acceptance this week, but it continues to teeter back and forth because Jonathan will greatly be missed by our team. He was an integral part of the work that we do to support City Council and the efforts that we have here. So Jonathan, we thank you. We thank you for your public service to the City of Asheville for all these years, and especially as your work in the community development field. And we're glad that at least we won't lose your expertise and service in this community. As you all know, he's moving to Buncombe County to continue to serve. But Jonathan, we just wanted to recognize you for your service. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the trust that the community has invested in me and the opportunity to serve the city and work with such a great group of people on a lot of important community concerns. So I'm going to take that with me and continue to look forward to seeing some familiar faces in the future. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan, so much. And thank you, Nikki, for sharing that sentiment. It is helpful that you will still be at the county. And as you've seen, the city and the county are working more and more together with each year we pass, and especially on housing. So I'm comforted that you will still be in the environment of helping everyone and that we will still see you and get to work together. But we hate to lose you. And darn it, we had just gotten staffed up. Oh, it's a never-changing cycle. But thank you so much, everyone, for being here with no callers on the line. We have reached the end of our meeting. It is 1:40, and I appreciate everyone's time, and we are adjourned.